Morning, a very warm welcome from the UNISA Directorate for Counselling and Career Development. We are apologizing for starting a few minutes late. We're just experiencing some technical challenges, but nevertheless, a very warm welcome. This morning, we are welcoming Mr. Rani Malaudzi. He will be talking to us about job opportunities and recruitment processes in the private sector. With me, I've got colleagues who will also be helping us throughout the program. And for now, I would like to give over to Mrs. Mandu Mukanya, who will be introducing our speaker for today. Thank you, Mandu.
Today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce one of our own graduates that we are proud of. He considers UNISA as his great alma mater. He is a well-rounded business executive with wide-ranging skills. Ronnie has a passion for sharing knowledge and empowering others, especially youth. He also carries a wealth of knowledge from his experience working in various roles in the public sector and the corporate world. But more than this, he is also a professional gospel singer. And ladies and gentlemen, it gives me pleasure to introduce this morning Mr. Ronnie Mraudzi. Thank you, Lisa.
Indeed. Good morning. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much again to you, Mrs. Makanya and Lisa and the team from UNISA. It's a great pleasure always to work with you and to share, some insights and knowledge from my experience, working with the various corporate entities that I work with, as well as my own experience in the corporate sector and the public sector as well. So it's great. It's a great pleasure to be back on the UNISA platform. And indeed, I am a very proud graduate and alma mater of the university, and I look forward to do a lot more this year with the university. And I'm glad we're starting as early as the first quarter of the year. So thank you very much for the invitation and for always being such a warm development unit to work with in the university. So today we're talking about job opportunities and recruitment processes in the private sector. So I'm going to try and keep the presentation very practical so that we can have a nice Q&A at the end. And so I thought, let me share some of the new insights that were developed by Universum Global as well as PNET. I think we all know PNET if we have been on the job market looking for employment, or if you're an employer looking for talent in the market. It's one of the biggest and the fastest growing career platforms in South Africa. And so they published a study at the end of last year, which showed some trends and statistics of how 2022 was wrapped up in terms of the job market last year. And what they found was that about 37% net employment is what we can look forward to globally. So what that means is that the global job market has increased by 37%. And I'll go into more detail in terms of how that's come about. But if we look at some of the macro trends, is that 52% of employers plan to hire this year, 2% are undecided. And of course, that is a function of the current economic climate across the world. 15% expect to lay off workers. Luckily, that is not too significant or too big, although we do know that a number of companies are laying off workers and retrenching for operational reasons and to contain costs. 31% plan to keep the workforce levels steady, which is a good thing because it means then that there is availability of jobs in the market, and that as much as new roles might not be created, that there is a sense that employers want to stabilize the job market. And one of the big trends that that came out of 2022. It's this revolution of 2022, which has been coined. And what that is talking about is the onset of the hybrid or remote working model, which has fast become one of the permanent working models for many businesses around the world. And we know this was driven obviously by the COVID pandemic, and most employers before COVID were not so keen on employees working from home or having flexible work arrangements. But we see that that's actually become one of the biggest trends in the job market last year. What that means or translates to is that there would be greater employment opportunities across border without, the legal admin of having to obtain a work visa, a work permit to work in a different country. We see a lot of companies employing employees all around the world. And if you look at most job postings, starting from at the end of last year, beginning of this year, you see that they will always ask you if you are willing to work from home, or they will inform you that the role that they've advertised is actually a remote working role. And usually those are also fixed term contracts. And we see the employment, a relationship or psychological contract there becoming a lot more flexible and a lot more remote in terms of that. So that's some of the biggest trends that we saw from last year. What we also further see is that there's a global increase in hiring across 11 industries, and one of the biggest ones, which we'll talk about later as well, it's IT, technology, telecoms, communications, and media. You'll see that it's sitting at about 50% of the whole market. And then following from there, it's 43%, which is banking, finance, insurance, and real estate. And I think these trends have been like this for at least the last 10 years. And since, there's been this global war for talent, and it's become more prevalent now because the world has become such a small place and a small village, global village, that connectivity is a lot more quicker. We're able to connect with people from all over the world instantly, whereas 20 odd years ago that was almost impossible to do. You had to call through a switchboard, through another switchboard to call a different country. But now the technology platforms have enabled us to break all those barriers, and we're able to connect instantly. And so these are some of the trends we see in terms of the trends or stats around hiring across those industries. And you'll see, interestingly, also there at 40%, the hospitality industry. We all know that the last 3 or 4 years, this was one of the most hard hit industries post-COVID, because literally that sector had to close down. We saw a lot of hotels shutting down. I know one of my favorites, the Hilton in Durban, was also at risk of shutting down. I'm not sure if they were able to save it, but I'm told that it might have been, it might have survived. And we saw a lot of airlines as well, closing down, a lot of layoffs in those sectors that support the whole tourism and hospitality industry. And so, interestingly, it's back. It's shown resilience, and it's sitting at about 40%, so third in line in that 11. And we see the others also there, in the 30s and the 20s coming up there. So these are some of the trends that I think are important for graduates, for students that are still trying to figure out, what their focus area should be. We can clearly see here that the sectors or industries to really, hone in and focus on in terms of a career path that might, in a way, increase someone's chances of getting employment or establishing a career in that sector, can pursue. So IT, and the financial services, as well as hospitality, tourism, and travel. How does the South African landscape look like? In terms of hiring, we've seen last year that the South African job market improved steadily. The strange thing is that we still see that there's an increased shortage in talent, especially in the high demand areas such as IT skills. And what I think that tells us as students, as professionals, is that at the moment as much as the unemployment rate is quite high between the professionals of the ages below 24, 25, we still see a big discrepancy between what industry is requiring in terms of skills and what then the universities or institutions of higher learning are producing in terms of skills. So there's still that mismatch between the supply and demand. And so I think one of the things that we should do in the universities as part of career development and coaching and guidance is ensuring that we align students with the right fields of study which we know that are in demand in industry out there, so that by the time someone finishes their 3-year degree or their certificate, whatever qualification they're doing, that they are at least in a career path that is going to allow them to quickly find employment. PNET also identified that the major, local skills gaps in IT, in the IT profession, are in these, areas of IT: software development, technical and business architecture, systems analysis, data analysis and data warehousing, business analysis, data design, development, administration, and IT projects administration and management. And so if someone is looking to start a career or to establish a field of study, these are some of the areas that we could guide them towards, because we know that they are in high demand, especially now that the world has become such a technology driven space. And of course, we see that a lot of companies that are in their growth phase are companies in the IT space. So if you go to Cape Town, we've got our own Silicon Valley there, which is employing quite a number of young people in the IT profession. So this is one of the big macro trends we see in terms of hiring in South Africa. And the interesting thing is that so almost 70% of employers, again, having difficulty filling jobs, not because they aren't graduates that are being produced by the institutions of higher learning, but it's the same issue around the mismatch that exists there between the output that universities are giving us or institutions of higher learning versus what industry is looking for. How does a candidate look like in today's sector, recruitment and job opportunities market? Your average candidate, 73% are female, 51% they are, or let's say 52% have got a tertiary qualification, just around 60% there residing in Gauteng, 47% of them willing to relocate, and about 88% employment equity candidates. The average length of time candidates stay in their roles, we see that it's about 4 years, 11 months, so from about 5 years or so, which is good, because it means that retention in organizations is improving. I think a few years ago we used to see that trend sitting at about 2 to 3 years. If we look at what is being offered in terms of market-related salaries, and you'll see that these are in that, digital marketing coordinator space, and you see it's ranging from about 18,000 rands a month all the way to about, let's say, 50,000 rands a month. And so these are some of the considerations that graduates and students should be aware of when they are choosing a field of study and choosing a career path. How does the future of work look like? as I indicated in the beginning, the future of work is a hybrid model in most instances. And what employers have found is that a hybrid model of work increases productivity and to some extent also has a positive impact on employee well-being, because there is a certain level of reduction of stress by reducing the amount of time that employees spend commuting to work. I think all of us that live in Gauteng will know that traffic is not necessarily an impressive thing or a good thing to deal with in the mornings and the afternoons when you're commuting back to work. Sometimes some people spend about an hour and a half, 2 hours just trying to get to work. And so you can imagine that if someone can wake up in the comfort of their own home, in their own study or their own living room, just take a quick shower and get to work almost immediately, that productivity is likely going to increase and they're in a better mental space to work, and nobody has ruffled them up in traffic, and they haven't spent that 2 hours sitting in a car or in a public transport method trying to get to work. And so companies have decided to focus a lot more on results. And so that also shows you that the way that companies are looking at performance management, as an example, in the workplace, would no longer be about watching people clocking into the office, spending the time behind the desk, and at 4 o'clock, then knocking off. But it's more around what output they produce more than it is how much time they spend in the office. And so you can imagine that if employees are going to allow people to work in the comfort of their own home, that there has to be a much higher level of trust in people and less monitoring, but monitoring the outcome and the output that people deliver on a day-to-day basis. Interestingly, in terms of the environment, what we find is that a hybrid work model allows for a decreased carbon footprint, because less and less people will be traveling, at the same time going to work, and that would also have a positive spin-off on a decreased carbon footprint. It doesn't necessarily work for all industries, because we know that our economy is still very much fueled by carbon fuels or fossil fuels, such as coal, as well as oil and gas, which is diesel and petrol, and those we all know that contribute to the carbon footprint and reduce our environmental sustainability. Also, quite interestingly, before COVID happened, only about 32% of employers had a flexible work arrangement or a hybrid work model where employees were allowed to work from home certain days of the week or even on a full-time basis. What we're seeing post-COVID now is that that number has significantly changed. Around 80% of employers are in fact enabled and encourage working from home type of work or hybrid model. In some instances, it's full-time, so off 4 or 5 days of the week. In some instances, 3 days a week and 2 days in the office. And so we find that there's quite a big shift in how the world of work is looking like, and you can just imagine that in a few years' time, also the development of technologies that allow us to work from home, that we'll see that become a lot more prevalent and cutting across all sectors. As I indicated as well, one of the other benefits that a hybrid work model allows is enhanced employee wellness. Because if you're at home, you're able to juggle quite a few things. Sometimes you're able to drop off your child at preschool or at school, pick them up, help them with homework, and still get back to work and deliver the output, because what employers are looking at is not how much time you're spending behind your desk at the office, but really about how you're delivering on the outputs. And the output, as long as it's got a timeline and deadline, can always be delivered, and other things that are part of your life can then find placement in an 8-hour day. And so that is what we are seeing in terms of the future work. All the other trends there, I think we can look at later as we look at that model. I think here again, we're just seeing that, the hybrid, model that has become part of our lives now does not only affect the work environment, but also it affects how students engage with educational and academia around the world. And we see that around 70% of students now take on, global programs online, which is good because it also means that it makes access to education a lot more higher. And also it means that it reduces the amount of the cost of education, because you don't have to go and travel and live in a different country in order to access international education and study. So what are the opportunities in terms of jobs that this type of future world of work and hybrid remote working provide for us? And you'll see there that there's data from 2020 Q4 as well as 2021 Q4. So what we see there is an increase, obviously, in the IT and technology job opportunities as a result of this remote working trend that we're seeing, and then business management there coming in a second, finance, as we saw, third, and then admin and office support, as well as sales, are becoming results or outcomes of that remote working model. And so I think these kind of trends help us or assist us to start, choosing the right career field, the right field of study that is going to allow us to access job opportunities in the future. In terms of the South African labor market landscape, Stats SA's, reported in Q3 of last year that 59.6%, or let's say call it 60%, of 15 to 24-year-olds are currently unemployed. That is quite high for young people in any country, and we know that we've got a relatively young country as well as a young continent, and so quite a number of our skills are being exported outside of the country, and many of our graduates, when they finish, want to go and work outside of the country, and so we are still experiencing quite a bit of brain drain in the country. If you look at countries in the West and in Europe, you will see that they are suffering or struggling with an aging population, and as well as a population that isn't growing, and so that in itself lends those countries in North America, in Northern Europe, to a skills shortage, and so you will see a lot of those governments making calls and invitations for foreign nationals and expats to apply for work visas and permits, in those countries. So once again, I think the emphasis here is just around making sure that we, provide you with some of these, stats and data, so that you start doing your homework, so to speak, in understanding which jobs are in high demand, and how do you access those jobs, and what kind of a career field should you choose that is going to enable you to access the job market soon after you finish your studies. And so top occupational sectors in demand in South Africa, business and management, and this cuts across middle management, department manager level, senior management, team leader and supervisor level, business development, executive management, or director level management. Of course, these ones ordinarily would apply to seasoned professionals who have got several years in that sector and who are looking, to add value to an organization. As a graduate, you probably have to start at the bottom at entry level, and we'll talk about that later, and then grow within that space. And we spoke about information technology. Those are some of the areas there. Finance, those are some of the areas there. Sales, admin, office support. And then what PNET was able to do as well was to check, with job seekers aged between 15 and 24, what type of roles are they applying for? And you will see there on the right-hand side that most 15 to 24-year-olds are applying for that admin office support cluster, as well as finance, sales, and then business and management and IT. If we take a look at what qualification levels the 15 to 24-year-olds are looking at, or what qualifications they have, you will see that a bulk of them just have matric, which is quite an interesting thing to observe. And I think when they try to delve into this at PNET and Universum, what they found is that a lot of young people now, because this is a South Africa statistic, by the way, because the cost of higher education is so high and exorbitant, most of them immediately after matric would look into finding employment and going to the job market almost immediately. And in most cases then would study whilst they work and then build all the way up until they finish a qualification. But as you can see from that statistic there, that we still have quite a lot of job seekers, especially in that millennial age group, that only have a matric. Perhaps also for the universities, it's maybe one of those stats that you can use as outreach to educate young matriculants about the importance of post-matric studies and tertiary and obtaining tertiary qualifications. So I think that's probably an opportunity there for community outreach for the careers and development unit at UNISA as well. And then I think this brings us then to a little bit of theory. What is career development now that we've seen how the job market and the landscape looks like? So put simply, career development, it's really the support that an organization or a company provides to an employee to enable their professional growth, especially to employees' movements to either new roles or projects within the organization. And this support often includes coaching, mentoring, skill development, networking opportunities with potential future employers, and career pathing. So that's how organizations provide a support system and structure to enable career development. What are some of the characteristics of the 21st century world of work? And interestingly, all of this is, it's consistent, over the last 5 or so years. And so what we find is that the focus of most employers and the way that we should be looking at the 21st century world of work is looking at it from an employability point of view and looking at graduateness. And we'll talk about what each of those means. Graduate skills and attributes, very, very important and central to this concept, because here we're talking about transportable generic skills that graduates come out of university with that enable them to access a wider spectrum of job opportunities as opposed to being functional experts that are geared towards one career path in their life, because we know that career paths or jobs are limited, and so the more broader a person's skill set is, the more employable they become as they're able to diversify their experience as well as add value to organizations in different ways. It's still very much a knowledge economy. Legislation is still important, and as we indicated earlier on, the hybrid model of work that's prevalent now in the workplace enables cross-border skills transportation and cross-pollination across border. We still see a very volatile economy. Retrenchments, we spoke about them earlier on. Companies laying off and optimizing and working more on a lean and mean structure than bloated structures, except of course for our dear beloved government. And high unemployment is still a factor to consider. We've spoken about this, but just for emphasis, the nature of careers has changed significantly, especially over the last 3 or 4 years. And COVID, as much as it was devastating, I think it has enabled us to adapt to a new set of requirements, both as potential employees or job seekers, as well as organizations that hire those job seekers. We see a lot of job seekers looking for more flexible type of work, which also talks to employability of individuals and how much they trust themselves and their own skill set to find and retain employment for a specific period of time. And so this is, I think, in a nutshell, how the nature of careers and the world of work has changed. Most of these things now, we see that careers are not as linear or hierarchical as they used to be, where you would focus on vertical movements from one level to the next, but that people can actually go through a series of side movements, career movements, before they actually move up, and in that way improving their experience as well as the skills and competencies that they are gleaning from the world of work, which makes them a lot more effective when they move on to the next level. We don't see people looking for lifelong employment anymore, as we spoke about that new psychological contract and that hybrid model of working and that flexibility. A lot of people looking at things like, work-life balance, the ability to take a holiday when you want to take it, and not being tied to a permanent contract where you've got limitations to incorporate, other aspects or areas of your life. And then I thought, let me just talk or touch on graduate fairs as well. I think also these are quite important, and to connect students with potential employers. And some of these and quite many of the universities are now doing virtual career fairs as well, where you're able to access a lot more information and a lot more employers all at one go, instead of having to jump around from different universities looking for employment opportunities at a graduate level. So I think graduate fairs allows students a safer and a softer landing into the corporate sector, into a professional job or career, where you enter through a development program that has got a lot of components where you get trained, you get coached, you get mentored, as we discussed earlier in terms of the career development process that organizations offer. And so usually graduate programs would, range from anything between a year and 24 months before that graduate is maybe confirmed or appointed in a permanent role. And in most cases, they get absorbed into other permanent junior management roles, depending on the objective of that graduate program. A lot of them are to fast track, graduates into leadership roles. We saw in the beginning that a lot of career opportunities exist in that management cluster, and so most companies, you'd find that they are lacking that succession plan in-house, and have to bring in graduates who are not as experienced, but who've got potential to be fast-tracked into those leadership roles. And of course, graduate programs also assist organizations to fill those mission-critical roles, and also find scarce skills or talent in the job market. What process do you normally follow? In terms of recruitment, and this applies both to professionals and graduates, but usually for graduates, it can be a little bit more intense or protracted as opposed to senior roles. In most cases, you'll find that there's an online application process where you submit your CV and you get shortlisted there and screened. In some instances, they will ask you to do online psychometric assessments. Usually they do a personality assessment and ability test. If the role is numerical, they'll test your numerical reasoning, verbal reasoning, technical assessments as well. And in some instances, they will do simulations, especially where they it's a management or supervisory role that you'll be going into, so in baskets, role plays, etc. After that, once they have some form of data about you, then they would shortlist you for the first interview. After which you would have a final interview. In the first interview, ordinarily, it might seem like a generic interview where you meet with either the HR manager together with the line manager. In some instances, just HR to get a sense of whether or not you're a good fit for culture, fit for the role, before you then go into the final interview where the technical aspects of the job are tested or assessed in that process, and you'd have a lot more of the line managers involved in that process. At this point, they would do a series of background checks, verify your qualifications, do character references. So it's quite important for you to have at least one or two references who can speak about your abilities, speak about your leadership qualities, that can speak about just the kind of person that you are. And sometimes, usually as as graduates or students, there are concerns around, but what if I haven't worked before? How will I be able to demonstrate some of those leadership qualities? And I always say that, it's good for you whilst you study that you find ways to develop additional skills, because just your qualification alone is not going to help you stand out or land that first job. And so volunteering in an NGO, volunteering in a school, being part of a social club at the university with like-minded students, taking up a leadership role there, it starts to help you build your CV and other skills outside of just your qualification, and that makes you stand out with employers. And so that's quite important for us to realize. And of course, they do a series of criminal record checks, credit checks, etc. And those are important. Sometimes we know students get up to all kind of mischief. Back in the days when I used to still recruit graduates for the likes of SAB and Massmart and other companies, we used to find quite a lot of students with criminal records. And these were not like hard crimes. These were, these crimes where either the student gets found with smoking weed back in the day before it was legal, etc. So you'd find that students would find themselves in trouble, or just for drinking under the influence of alcohol, those kind of things. So it's important, for students to always remember the repercussions of some of their actions, and in terms of the ability to secure employment in the future. So quite important to just reflect on that and be aware. Usually then after that, you'd have a job offer and you go through some kind of induction before you start your role. I think I'm just going to skip quickly. I think I've got a few more slides to go and then I'll be done and we can do a Q&A. What are employers looking for? And this is where, graduate skills and attributes come to play, as well as employability. Everybody has got the potential to learn and to go to university, attend a institution of higher learning. And so that is not necessarily the only thing that employers or companies are looking for in a person, because as I indicated, there are many graduates that are being churned out of the education system. But the question is, can those graduates, solve problems, real business problems, think laterally, assist with decision making, in the organization, and as a result, contribute to the bottom line of that organization or that company? Do graduates, understand that an organization is an enterprise and it's an entrepreneurial space, and so their contribution there, they have to think about the organization not just as an employer where they get a paycheck at the end of the month, but where they understand their impact and contribution to how that organization ultimately makes money and ultimately creates opportunities for them as employees, but also for others. And analytical thinking skills, very, very critical. Most roles now require this skill, being able to analyze a broad spectrum of data and information, and being able to synthesize that into practical, implementable solutions for the organization where you work. And then, and that speaks to scholarship, a concept called scholarship, which I won't have time to really go into in this presentation today. And then the second aspect of that is around interactive skills, and you'll see that some of the concerns around this hybrid world of work that we find ourselves in is that it does reduce our ability as human beings and as workers to interact with each other in teams physically. And so in a way, there are concerns, that, if we become virtual throughout the employment life cycle of a person, that we might lose some of those, person-to-person skills and the benefits that come with interacting with a team of people, building relationships in order to improve productivity and teamwork. But interactive skills, nonetheless, still very important. So the ability of individuals to, to interact in a productive manner, reducing conflict and all of those things to ensure that we can all drive towards one goal, one vision, one objective. Presenting and applying information. This is one of those skills that I think seem soft, but actually can make or break someone's career. As an example, to put it simply, sometimes you find that a candidate comes through for an interview. You have shortlisted them because their CV looked really good and convincing, and then they start to present themselves to you, and you find that there's a big disconnect as an employer or as an interviewer or recruiter. And so what's important there is that as much as we can, have a great set of skills, a great set of competencies, attributes, if we fail to convey them to a potential employer, we're most likely not going to access, good opportunities and grow in our careers. And so that's one of those important skills to learn. And so when you take up, volunteering work in an NGO, when you take up, a leadership role, you start to learn presenting, you start to learn chairing meetings, you start to learn how you apply information, and that alone then sets you apart as a potential candidate for a career opportunity, a job opportunity, etc. But what we're finding also, again, is that a lot of job seekers do want to work in an ethical environment and for organizations that are responsible corporately. And so you find that a lot of candidates will ask, the question around the sustainability programs of the organization, ethics, etc., because that's become also quite important in creating a conducive work environment. And finally, lifelong learning. So continuous learning, as we said previously, so it is important that we build a broad, generic set of skills and attributes. And the only way to do that is to learn continuously, be curious, raise your hand, put up your hand for any project that comes up, because you're most likely going to learn something new in that area, which then makes you a lot more employable. It makes your retention a lot higher, and it makes you a lot more relevant to business. As business grows, you find that you are a lot more applicable across, the spectrum, depending on, what changes happen, in the environment. What do companies use to attract talent? In most cases, it's in-house the careers portal through a website where you can load your CV. Sometimes they use, online job boards, LinkedIn, Peanut, Career Junction, etc. Sometimes they would use headhunters, especially for the senior and professional roles. Sometimes it's word of mouth through employees of that company. Less and less are using newspapers, I think, apart from government and public sector entities. But most employers now do the career management and talent acquisition online. And so graduate phase as well would look like that. We spoke about this briefly. How do you climb that corporate career ladder? I think obviously as a student, you are going to be looking at entry level. So learnerships, internships, apprenticeships, graduate programs. As you grow, you then start to look at junior to middle management roles where you've got at least 1 or 2 years experience in the sector and the role. Then, middle to senior level, 3 to 8 years, and executive level, 10, 15 plus years. Once you become a lot more experienced. And of course, like I said, this process is not necessarily linear. Sometimes you might have to move sideways. Sometimes you might have to move a step back to learn something different, and in order for you to spring forward. And what we're finding finally is that, in this world of technology, in most cases, you might have to interact with an employer or a prospective job opportunity online. The moral of the story of this slide is most likely an employer might invite you, using some kind of cloud-based computing system, MS Teams, Zoom, Google Meet, for you to have the first interaction. Please make sure that you consider these as seriously as you would a face-to-face interview where you dress up, you look neat, you look sharp, and you look presentable. There's nothing worse than inviting a candidate for an interview, even if it's a meet and greet for the first one, and they are just not looking presentable. They are in their gown, there is noise in the background, and it just makes it very difficult, and it creates such a bad impression, first impression, in that interaction. So make sure that you always maintain a professional environment, even when you're invited by an employer or prospective employer to a virtual interaction of sorts. Make sure that you are in a place that has got good connectivity, good Wi-Fi. There's nothing as frustrating as a line that's going to break all the time as you're trying to have a conversation. And so make sure that you treat it with respect. If you need to find a quiet, workspace, there are many workspaces now that are shared where you can find a quiet room and you use that to connect and speak to whichever employer would like to speak to you, and prepare the same way that you would prepare for a face-to-face interview. I think that will bring me to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I think we can probably have a Q&A.
Okay, so our first question that we can take a look at is Sia was asking, in your experience, how do employers view online courses, for example, through Coursera, and specifically for IT?
Thanks for that question. So I think that employers are still in a state of, I guess, evolution and adapting to the new world of work, or the future world of work. And so I think when it comes to qualifications and where people get them from, you find that employers are still very much traditional in that sense in most career fields. But I think interestingly, in the IT field, it's not so much where you get your qualification from as it is how you apply what you have learned and how talented you are in that application. So what we found is that it doesn't necessarily mean that if you got your qualification from the top 20 universities in South Africa that you would rank ahead of other candidates, but it's more around are you able to program if you're a programmer? Are you able to code if you're a coder? How talented are you? How innovative are you in that space? And so most of, and that's why even in primary schools now, small kids are taking or are being taught coding and programming. because you want to spark that interest at a young age. And so I think what we're finding and seeing is that as much as there are companies that are still very traditional in terms of they want you to get, a Bachelor of Science degree in computational sciences or in information technology or information sciences, whatever the case is. But it's mostly around how you apply those skills, because IT skills are very practical. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, that's great. It's great to hear that at least in some industries, employers are being, or they are more open. But I guess for now it might be a good idea to have, you've got your formal qualification, but then, as you said, to be able to show practically that you are able, for example, to code or to do business analysis. Then it might be useful for you to look at some additional courses just to build those employability skills. Okay, so the next question is also a bit related to that. So Lizzie was asking, what else can I do while I am busy with my degree to help me be more employable?
Yeah, I think I covered that as well. So it is really very important, for students not to be one-dimensional in their approach. I think when you go to any institution of higher learning, I think the objective should be to learn as much as possible, both academically, socially, in most instances as well. You'll find that the networks that you create at university become the network that you use to access career opportunities and so that that infamous line of saying it's not about what you know, but who you know, becomes relevant. And so it's important for for us when we are in an environment of an institution of higher learning to make sure that we've got a balanced outlook, and that we are we're doing what we need to do academically to pass our degree and to excel in our field of study. But also to make sure that we develop all the other areas of interest. All of us here, we're not just academic people. Some of us have got other talents and other abilities. For me, it was singing, so I can still access that as a career professionally, and make money from it. But I also studied. And I've learned presenting, and so I can also be in radio and do broadcasting. So it's quite important for us to make sure that we broaden our base of skills and things that we can do, so that we're able to plug into many situations and excel and still be adaptable and deliver good results. But like I said as well, being involved in leadership is important whilst you study. Volunteering is important. It might not maybe give you money or a lot of money. They might give you a stipend, whatever the case is, but the skills that you're developing there will definitely set you apart as a candidate when an employer looks at your CV. And you'll have a lot more to write on your CV as a student, especially. So, you find that a lot of graduates would say, what do I put under experience because I haven't worked before? You put in all your leadership achievements, your involvement, even on your school projects where you've led, your projects and your classmate for a project, you put that in because we want to see that you are able to apply some of those skills practically, and that you'd be able to fit into a team a lot more seamlessly than someone, who has not had that exposure at all.
Thank you, Ronnie. So what I really hear is that it's very important for you to think, I would want to use the word strategically and very much proactively about the kind of opportunities that you need to actually create for yourself to develop these skills that employers are looking for. Which links to Sam's question. You spoke about, for example, volunteering is one way. But Sam was also asking, what are the best ways for me to develop the skills that employers are looking for. So are there any other additional tips that you can give students for developing those skills, especially those ones that you listed under the what employers are looking for?
Yes, so you know what I would say, and by the way, I don't have answers to all the questions, so the other colleagues must also chip in. But I think if we, like you said, if we look at our careers strategically and we look at it as a portfolio, I think that's one of the ways that you can start to strategically think about, okay, what skill, what competency, what ability, what qualification, what course, what program, short or long, should I do, and why am I doing it? I think that will start to assist us to, match ourselves with the right opportunities in the future a lot more accurately than what I think happens a lot. I think a lot of us go into a field of study, let's say accounting or finance, and we hope to stumble into something, after we finish our qualification or our degree. That's not the best way, I think, to arrive at this is what I've got in my toolkit of skills, and I can apply this tool in this way in this career, and I can plug this one in here in this way in this career, and so you start to think, strategically around what are the things that you need to do, what are the forums you need to be on to learn, what kind of mentorship do you need, because another way that you can also develop is through mentorship and coaching, but again, it is not one of those things that works like a magic wand where you say, I've got a mentor and I've got a coach, and therefore I'm going to, somehow miraculously get to where I want to be. Even in choosing a mentor, you still need to be very strategic and intentional about, okay, why am I looking up to this particular professional or this particular leader to be my mentor? What is it that I'm going to learn from them that is going to help me advance? Because they also can't coach you or mentor you effectively if you've not created that clarity yet in your mind about what it is that you are trying to achieve, what objective, what outcome you're hoping to get, from that relationship. And the same way goes into, studying further additional skills that you might need to acquire along the way. Unless you have a roadmap of this is how, I'm going to travel this journey, and that is the ultimate destination where I want to get, you won't know then what provisions you need along the way to get there. So I think it's important for us, to think strategically about ourselves. I went to a friend of mine was launching a book called The Professional Chameleon. She's a professional international coach, executive coach. And she made some interesting, because she's worked with so many professionals across many countries. She said, one of the things that she's found is that, a lot of us say our work will speak for itself, but your work doesn't have a voice. You have to speak and convince somebody that your work is worth the promotion that you want, or it's worth the job that you want, and that you can do. You're the best, programmer, if that's what it is that you want to be doing, or the best marketeer that there is. And so you have to find, the voice and the expression for your skill set, to the target audience that you'd like to hear that message. And so these things don't happen, by assimilation. We have to be intentional about how we get there.
Thank you. I really like that word, intentional. I think it's, very valuable, because, as you spoke about, that sometimes we leave a lot of things to chance. So also just being intentional and mindful about, as you're studying, you also need to be prioritizing working on your career. So I think that's a very nice word to keep in mind as we are embarking on our journeys. The next two questions are coming back to when you spoke about, the move or shift towards remote work, hybrid work. And I remember that you did mention, that there is a shift in terms of that. But Duncan was just wondering, how keen are companies really on remote work options? And maybe just as an add-on, would it be that there are certain industries in the labor market that are more keen on remote work or hybrid work options? Or what is your experience over the past couple of years?
Thank you. That's also a great question. So I think what we're seeing is that, if you remember from the presentation, is that, before COVID happened, remember COVID forced all of us to think differently, work differently, and we had no choice but to adapt, because at some point, some of us, all of us, the whole world was locked down. But work still had to continue. A lot of companies, I think, in that space when there was that confusion of, okay, they've shut us down, we can't go out, we can't go to work, industries are closed except for the essential services, of course. What do we do from here? I think it probably took some companies a good 3 to 6 months before they could figure out how to get their staff back to optimal, productivity levels. And so what that taught companies was that, you have to be ready for any eventuality that could happen in the bigger scheme of things. A pandemic could make the whole world stop. But does that mean that then you don't, produce, or you don't enable your staff to work? And so how does it look like? And so what we found that in the last, 4 years, after COVID, and now in the post-COVID era, so to speak, that, almost 80% of companies, in fact, have retained a hybrid remote working model all around the world. More especially in the technical fields, in IT, in finance, insurance, banking. A lot of the companies have, including sales and business development, are now embracing a more hybrid form of working, where it's not possible. Obviously, it's in sectors like manufacturing, where you have to look after a production line. But even in those sectors, a lot of companies are looking at how they use artificial intelligence, robotics, etc., to run production lines. Obviously, that means that some jobs become redundant, and it means that then we need to create space for new types of roles. And so either you're going to be looking at upskilling or reskilling or repurposing certain employees or certain roles in the company to adapt to that environment. But predominantly, I think in most sectors, companies have adopted a hybrid model of work. In most cases, they will determine the number of days you work from home and the number of days you come into the office. I think a lot of companies, like I said, still want that social interaction and that team collaboration, that in-person feel from time to time. And so those are some of the considerations that companies are looking at. If we look at some of the, I just want to quickly, open that study here. Because when they were looking at hybrid models of working, they looked at, what are some of the concerns that employers have around this remote working, era that we're in, so to speak. And some of it's, as I said, lower levels of social and cultural bonding, the negative impact on those unable to work from home. So as an example, right now, a lot of people would be disrupted by load shedding if they work from home, because they might not have a backup generator or solar energy to help them work. and so that would disrupt productivity. And so going to the office on days like that would seem to be better, obviously, than working, from home. In some instances, companies worry about a decline in employee engagement if they're working from home, because you're working alone, you're not having that team, dynamic with other workers and other departments and teams in the business. The reduced ability, obviously, for employers to monitor and manage performance, as we spoke about it earlier. So traditionally, your boss assumes that when you come in at 8 o'clock and they see you come in and they see you leave at 4 or 5 o'clock, the assumption is that in between you arriving and you leaving for home, it's that you have put in your 8 or 9 hours and you have done the work. And so companies are grappling with, how do we manage the output more than it is about the time that someone spends at home. And so those are some of the things that employers would be concerned and worried about with this hybrid remote working. But there is great affinity towards that hybrid model of work.
Thank you, Ronnie. Okay, so the next question is more about international companies recruiting in South Africa. So Tyrone was asking, are there a lot of opportunities for being employed by international companies in South Africa remotely? And then a question linked to that is, Umpumetse was asking, is there a way to confirm if an international recruitment company is legit?
Okay, so to the first question, are there a lot of international, companies recruiting in South Africa remotely? Yes, there are. Especially some of the ones that are headquartered in Cape Town or in the Western Cape region. Quite a lot of them do have a lot of international, assignments. But like I said, in most cases, those assignments are usually fixed-term contracts or short-term assignments, as opposed to the permanent, employment contract. The second part of the question, maybe just remind me again, Lisa.
Is there a way to confirm if an international recruitment company is legit?
Yeah, so that's a good question also, very difficult to determine. But I think, there is no structured methodology or, an international body that I could say, companies like that register with, essentially, for you to validate if they are who they say they are. Excuse me. But I think there are certain basic things that you can look at to determine if someone is legitimate. And usually, I think online presence, the online presence of that entity is one of the ways that you can use to check. Just excuse me a second, Lisa.
No problem. While we are waiting for Ronnie, I was thinking about an article that I read a couple of weeks ago about somebody who was who got a job offer from a company, and they started with the whole process of asking her to, or they said that they're going to supply her with equipment to work from home. So, for example, a laptop and some backup power and so on. But then they asked her to buy those things. And then she had to send it to the company in order for them to brand it, and then they will send it back to her. So as she was busy with this process, she wrote in the article that she felt quite like she wasn't sure, something didn't sit right with her, and she also asked people around her. But in the end, just before she then sent that equipment that she bought for them now to rebrand it in quotation marks, she realized, or she found somebody who then told her, no, that this is a scam. So I guess, for example, we always talk about when a recruiter asks you to, for example, pay them money in advance for specific opportunities, or if there's a company that asks you to kind of, make some kind of monetary investment before you've even started working. I don't know, for me personally, you know, those are kind of alarm bells that I would listen to.
Yes, absolutely, and I agree with you. One of the big red flags is when a recruiter starts to ask you for money or to make some kind of monetary contribution towards a recruitment process. So any legitimate process will not involve money. The least you could spend, it's the money you would spend, you know, trying to get a taxi or getting fuel for yourself to get to the interview. But luckily, you know, like I said, the world is quite technological and everything is online, and you can find most things online. There is actually, if you just simply go on Google and you type in scam and you type the name of whichever entity, you can usually find quite a lot. Just using those, you know, search words in Google. So you just say scam alert and you type in the name of whichever, if it's a recruitment agency or a company that claims to be looking to recruit you, you can do that, and you'll be surprised just how much you can find out just using that simple Google, you know, term and search. But yes, Lisa, to your point, I think once. And usually sometimes, you know, you will feel a sense of discomfort, you know, if something is not sitting well with you or doesn't seem okay. Sometimes it's good to ask around. So say a company is in the IT space or it's in marketing or it's in manufacturing and you haven't quite heard about it, or a recruiter or a recruitment agency claim to be recruiting for a particular industry or particular company, you know, you can always, you know, just check, you know, which other entities or bodies or individuals are linked to that particular sector, and you can just check, you know, with some of those people if they're aware of a company like that, if it's legitimate, etc. There are several ways. Sometimes you have to play, you know, a bit of a, you know, private investigator role to make sure that you're not scammed or sometimes even, you know, find yourself in danger. There are many stories, you know, where people were asked to come for an interview to a place that, you know, doesn't even have offices, and they end up being trafficked or, you know, other tragic things like that happening. So it is very, very important, that question, because you know, it does, you know, talk to your own personal safety and security as you embark in a job, you know, search process. And of course, there are many people that will take advantage of the dire situation that we've got in the country, where there are limited jobs and a high unemployment rate. And so when you start to look for a job, I think do your homework. It's very, very important. Do your homework, you know, ask around. If something doesn't feel right, you know, look into it, investigate it. And also remember that, you know, once you've shared your CV, you've shared your ID document, you've shared, you know, your personal information, that you've given that, you know, that personal information away, and they can do whatever they do, you know, with that information. So I think guard, you know, your information quite closely and quite jealously to ensure that you don't get scammed and robbed and those kind of things. So that's very, very important, Lisa, that we take into account our personal safety, our security, the security of our personal information, so that we don't find ourselves, you know, with open accounts, credit cards that we know nothing about, etc. And someone is trading using our information. There are a lot of those scams out there. So let's all just be careful and use your common knowledge and your that third voice, you know, to assess and determine whether something is legitimate or not.
Thank you, Ronnie, and thank you, Umpumitsu, for that question. There was also somebody asking, you spoke about graduate development programs. So how can I find out about the available programs? What would be the best ways for me to search for that information?
Yeah, so there are many ways. I think one of the ways is that a lot of the employers that have graduate programs, they do approach the universities. I've been out of touch, of that world for quite a while now. So I'm not sure if the graduate programs are back, to the physical events on campuses around the country. Maybe yourself and Ms. Mandu can respond to that. But usually, a lot of companies will participate in the university career open days and career fairs. But I do know that during COVID, a lot of the universities worked with a number of virtual, service providers to provide those virtual career fairs, and they would send out to the database of the university when there's a virtual career fair and career event. And so that's where most graduate employers would advertise their programs. But most of them do accept the invitation. Do accept the applications from students on their company websites. So sometimes what helps is if you go on LinkedIn or you go on PNet or Career Junction or any of those big career websites, and you look for your desired employer, usually you might find on their website that they've got, opportunities for graduates as well as for experienced hires or professionals.
Thank you, Ronnie. Mandu, do you perhaps have any additional information you can share?
Yes, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Ronnie. In terms of companies, I would like encourage our students to respond to the call for our virtual careers fair that we are in partnership with the South African Graduate Recruiters Employers Association. So Lisa will just announce the dates if she's ready, but otherwise keep on checking the space where we advertise our activities. It is bigger and there's more organizations and companies to access during that virtual career fair. And during the course of time, we'll prepare students on how to engage with employers in the virtual space, because sometimes students, they just go and look, but they don't visit the presentations that are online during the process of the virtual fair. So we encourage the students to check the information that we advertise so they can be able to access whatever information and even job adverts that we post as and when the companies send them to us. So that is what I can share. And lastly, I just want to go back to the questions on the international companies that recruit in South Africa, to say that Ronnie, you have covered it so well in terms of vigilance and students, our students and graduates protecting themselves, but also to emphasize that even locally in our country, there are so many scammers that please be vigilant. And especially when it comes to people who recruit you and call you for interviews in dodgy places, because the issue of human trafficking is also another challenge that we are facing in our country, where scammers pose as recruiters. So that is all that I can share for now. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Mandu. Ronnie, Susan was saying thank you for all the stats. How can I learn more about the high demand sectors and how I could prepare for jobs in these fields?
Yeah, I think one of the ways to learn about the high demand sectors is to follow, Stats SA. They do a quarterly labor report update every quarter. I'm sure they're going to be releasing one at the end of March. They released one at the end of last year. So that will give you a good sense of what's happening in the job market. They're usually quite good and accurate with that data. But also, there are various platforms, online that do provide talent data and graduate information and job information. The likes of PNet. PNet is fast becoming one of the biggest platforms that's got job data as well as career information and vacancies as well. So that's a good way to keep abreast of what's happening in the industry. Career Junction, also LinkedIn. It's also one of the big platforms that would give you both international and local content in terms of that. In terms of preparing for the world of work, I think we've spoken quite in great length, about it. The main thing I think in today's world of work is that don't be one-dimensional. Even if you're studying accounting, make sure that you've got other skills that can be applied in the world of work. Because what happens if you don't find that specialist role that you studied for? It means you're going to be either frustrated. There's going to be a mismatch between you and what's available in the market. And we see this quite a lot with when we do, internship programs and graduate programs. Usually, the interns or graduates would need to be rotated, around different departments within the organization. And you find that they are not really engaged as they rotate until they get to the department that they believe they studied for. And it's just such a lost opportunity, because even if they put you in sales or they put you in inventory or they put you in admin, there is something there to learn. You might just find that actually what you studied for and in practice what is available in the world of work are two different things, and you find a different passion, and you thrive in that area, and you continue in that career path. So I just think that there needs to be also an open-mindedness about how we approach the world of work, careers, and jobs.
Thank you, Ronnie. Sydney was wondering how many pages maximum can your CV be? And if you are a final year student, for example, can you add a statement of results?
So this question is quite difficult to answer. It depends, and I'll say it depends. Your CV, remember, your CV is a representation of who you are. It speaks for you when you're not there. It's your foot in the door, essentially. And so what's important, I think, is for you to make sure that your CV speaks directly to the opportunity that you are chasing at that point in time. So if there is no alignment between the role or the job that you're applying for and what you've got on your CV, it probably means you should not apply for that job. And so I think in determining how long your CV should be, what you should include and attach, usually it's good to follow the instructions on the invitation to apply for the role. They'll normally give you all the specifications of what they need from you in order to assess your application. So sometimes they'll say, give us a comprehensive CV. Sometimes they'll say abridged. Sometimes they will say include a motivational letter. And those motivational letters usually are quite good for you to expand further in terms of why you believe they should consider you for that particular role. What I've seen is that, especially dealing with graduate applicants, is that most graduate applicants don't put a lot of thinking in that motivational letter. Remember, you would have a lot of gaps and shortcomings as a graduate. And so that letter gives you an opportunity to present yourself differently outside of your CV to an employer. So even if you might be lacking in one area that is required, you are able to offer an explanation, or you're able to motivate why you believe you can you can do the job that has been advertised. And so sometimes they'll ask you to provide an ID document. I usually don't encourage people to submit an ID, as a first step in the process. Even on your CV, you don't need to put your ID there on your CV. CVs have changed in the way that we look at them. So we would try and minimize as much the personal information that you provide, because when you send your CV somewhere, sometimes you're not sure where it's going. So you want to make sure that if there's additional information that they need, they can always ask for it. But at least they must be able to contact you. So a cell phone number and an email address are probably the most important things there. You don't even need to put your address because that already exposes you to quite a bit of risk. So just enough information for the recruiter to be able to contact you, ask for more information if they need to, and you give them the preliminary documents that they would request from you.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. Just for all of you here, for your information, we will be hosting a CV writing event such as this one. If you could just, again, stay up to date on the My UNISA events calendar. But in that session, we will definitely be addressing the details or the intricacies of putting together a CV, as Ronnie now said, that is linked to the needs of the organization that you're applying to. Okay, we're going a bit over time, but we've got 2 more questions that I would want us to look at. Is that okay with you, Ronnie?
Yes, no, that's fine. I'm still okay.
Okay. So the second last question, I'm an aspiring business analyst and currently a final year business informatics student. How much do your results affect employment chances, and do employers value marks more than proven proficiency via projects?
So it's a good one also. So I think it's a combination of both. In some instances, as your way in, the employer could say they're looking for a GPA of at least 60% as an example. And so if they're dealing with, say, applications of up to 1,000, 2,000, as I've dealt with in the past, and sometimes up to 4,000 applicants for, a graduate program or an entry-level program, then you have to kind of use a way to sift. And so sometimes academic marks are predominantly just a criteria to sift. And so are academic results important? Yes, because they could be your foot in the door. They could be the way that you at least reach the minimum requirement for the selection process. And in terms of application, yes, sometimes you're not able to prove that you're able to apply better than the next person because your GPA might be low. So that's why I said, a combination of both helps you, create a better chance for yourself to be called.
Thank you, Ronnie. Then the final question is, does Career Junction and PNet vet the recruitment companies registered with them? How easy is it for anyone to register as a recruiter on these sites? If you've got anything that you could share with us, but also again for information, we have invited Michelle Dobson from PNet and Career Junction to also have a session with students about compiling their online profile. So that is one of the things that she talks about. So I'm not sure if there's anything that you could add.
I'm so glad that you are having PNet coming through, because I think they would be able to shed a bit more light in terms of how they vet the companies that or the recruiters and agencies that they've got on their database. I would imagine that they go through a process to vet and verify. But I think also they do have a disclaimer on their website that candidates should also still do their own due diligence when they interact with a recruiter. I think the white collar crimes have become so sophisticated that it's so difficult to sift everything out of the system. whatever it is. So I think it's just important to always be vigilant. If something doesn't feel right, usually PNet and other platforms would have a call center that you can call in and say, there's this, agency that says they are legitimate and they are on your website and they've advertised a job, but something doesn't feel right. Can I talk to you about them? Are they legitimate? Have you vetted them? Have candidates in the past complained about them, etc.? So I think it always helps to verify, especially if something starts to feel a bit fishy.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. Just from my side, a huge thank you. But I will ask my colleague Vusumuzi Penyani to do the official thank you. Just as a parting message to those who are attending, our next session will be on the 14th of March, and in that session we'll be focusing on developing your self-knowledge and self-reflection for career development. And then, as I mentioned, on the My UNISA events calendar, there will be information posted about all the different events that we will basically be having twice a week for the next few months. Before we sign off, I will post the dates for the virtual grad expo that Mrs. Makanya spoke about. So again, on the My UNISA events calendar, we will be posting the detailed information about how to prepare and how to join for the virtual grad expo. For now, thank you, Vusumuzi, if you could just end off the session for us.
Thank you. Just a word, maybe Lisa, about the recording.
Oh yes, the session will be recorded. So in the Q&A, I've posted the link to our YouTube channel. So we will be posting the recording of this session on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. So it's youtube.com/UNISA careers. Thank you.
Thank you. My job is quite easy, is to, I won't keep you for long, is to thank the presenter and the organizers. So let me first thank you, thank Mr. Ronnie for coming through to, not in person, but virtually, to give your time to share this important information with our students. And we have shared with our students a lot, and I just want to highlight a few things like the trends we have shared with the students, the jobs that are in high demand that students that they need to know. And the important thing is what I've picked up myself, what employers are looking for. Because we found that when students write CVs or when they apply for certain jobs or something like that, they tell the employer what they are looking for, but without knowing what the employers are looking for. I think this will actually help our students to understand that you don't have to say what I'm looking for myself, but what the employer is looking for, so that you can actually fit in that. And the third thing is, when you talked about, is the whole question of volunteer. Was very important, because but there were a lot of opportunities where they could volunteer and gather some experience when they apply. Then I say, I have an experience in A, B, C, D. I think you raised that, you actually emphasized that point very well, and I thank you for that. And then I won't really talk too much about the fourth industrial revolution and remote working that you have talked about, that the students that they need to prepare for that world, because it's the virtual world we're in right now. And these workshops used to take place in person. People would have come to UNISA, and you have to make your time to come to UNISA. But now it doesn't matter where you are, and the time, just have to connect and sit and then attend the workshop, and then from there and move. So this is where we are moving, most of us. And for emphasizing that, and for also employers, you made that point very well. So I'd like to thank you very much, and I hope that you'll also be available when Member Kanya called you and said, please come and assist our students, because this is what we do in order to prepare our students for the future. And the second person I would like to thank is Mrs. Makanya for organizing this workshop and taking time to organize this workshop for you, our students, because we want the best for you. So Mrs. Makanya is sitting there and said, what can we do for our students? What can we do for you? So she is doing this thing not for her. She's doing these things for you. She's organizing these things for you. She's calling people who are in the industry, you know, these big names, Ronnie coming in to share this important information with you, because she said this will be good for you. And it's really very important to give her feedback and say to her, this is good, or this is not good, or this is what we are looking for. Can you also organize these things for us? And she will be there, said, I'm here listening. She is here for you guys. And please approach her and give her feedback and saying, this is what we think about the workshop you gave us, but also can you look at ABCD for us? Because she's doing all these things, she's organizing all these workshops, not for her, but for you to get that information and able to use this information for the future. And the last person I'd like to thank is also our program director, Lisa, who has facilitated this workshop very well. Technological person who organized what we see right now. She's done that, and because she wants to, she also, you know, she's here to make sure that you get the best, and you are able to ask all the questions that you need to ask, and she's able to assist you and give you the information about the workshops that are coming. So thank you very much to everyone else. So thank you Ronnie for coming through. Thank you Mrs. Makanya for organizing this workshop, and thank you to our program director and all the people who have been involved. You know, there are people that we see that I'm thinking right now, but also there are people in the background that we don't see, but they have made this possible. So we thank them and all those people, and to you. And lastly, I'd like to thank you for taking this time, you as students, for taking time to come to this workshop. This is important for you, and you have made sure that you took some time and you attended this workshop, and now you have more information than you can able say, okay, this is what I need to do, this is what I need to do in the future. If you need any help, please do not hesitate to call us and to call Mrs. Makanya, to send an email. Lisa has already shared the email with us. That's where you can talk to us, and then we can respond to you. So thank you very much to everyone else, and I wish you the best, and I wish you the best weekend until we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vusumusi. And on that high note, also just a thank you from me to everyone who has been involved, specifically also those of you who made the time and the commitment to attend this session. We hope you have a good day further, and we hope to see you next week at our session on the 14th of March. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you, Ronnie. See you at the next event. Thank you, colleagues.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Ms. Makanya, Leza, and Mr. Vusumusi. Thank you so much.